Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely used, even though nothing openly cruel was said? Maybe someone only calls when they need help. Maybe they act warm when they want something, then distant the moment they get it. Maybe they praise you, lean on you, charm you, even make you feel special, but underneath it all, you sense a cold calculation. And the most disturbing part is this. Some people do not relate to others as human beings. They relate to them as functions, a source of comfort, a source of status, a source of attention, a source of control. Um, that truth can hurt, especially if you are the kind of person who loves deeply, overthinks every mixed signal, and keeps trying to understand people from the most compassionate angle. But here's what many people never say clearly enough. When someone treats everyone like a tool, it usually did not begin with arrogance. It began with emptiness. Somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing connection as something to feel and started seeing it as something to manage. And once you understand why, you begin to see not just their darkness, but your own patterns of tolerating it. Some people do not enter relationships asking, how can I love, understand, or connect? Instead, often without saying it out loud, they ask, what can this person do for me? That is the dark side we are talking about, not cartoon villains, not dramatic movie monsters. Real people, the friend who only remembers you when they are lonely, the partner who gives affection when they feel you pulling away, the family member who treats your kindness like an unlimited resource, the coworker who flatters, borrows your energy, then disappears when you need support. They may look normal. They may even look wounded, charming, intelligent, or deeply misunderstood. But beneath the surface, people become objects in their emotional economy. This usually does not start from pure evil. It often starts from emotional disconnection. When a person grows up feeling unseen, unsafe, criticized, controlled, or loved only when they perform a role, they may learn a painful lesson. Relationships are not places of mutual care. They are places of survival. In that inner world, vulnerability feels dangerous. Authenticity feels risky. Depending on others feels humiliating. So instead of learning how to bond, they learn how to manage impressions, gain leverage, and stay in control. That is why some people become experts in reading weaknesses, but beginners at genuine intimacy. They can sense your fear of abandonment, your need for validation, your habit of people-pleasing. They notice how badly you want peace, how quickly you blame yourself, how much you hope to be chosen, and consciously or unconsciously, they use that map. Not always because they wake up planning to manipulate, but because using people feels safer to them than needing people. Control becomes their substitute for closeness. At first, this can be confusing because they do not always seem cruel. Sometimes they seem fragile. Sometimes they tell heartbreaking stories. Sometimes they cry, apologize, promise change, or make you feel like the only one who understands them. And that is where many caring people get trapped. They mistake emotional intensity for emotional depth. But intensity is not depth. Need is not love. Possession is not connection. A person who treats others like tools often does not ask, who are you really? They ask, how do I keep you near? How do I keep you useful? How do I keep you feeding the part of me that feels empty? That emptiness can come from trauma, insecure attachment, shame, or a deeply buried belief that they are worthless unless they can extract something from others. Attention becomes medicine. Admiration becomes oxygen. Your forgiveness becomes a hiding place for their lack of accountability. And here is the painful truth for the viewer who has been on the receiving end. Being used does not mean you were foolish. Very often it means you were generous in a world where many people are starving emotionally. You showed patience, empathy, and hope. But empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. The moment you keep explaining away patterns that keep hurting you, compassion starts turning against you. The deepest insight is this: people who use others do not always hate people. Sometimes they simply do not know how to meet people without also trying to control what they provide. They confuse love with access, loyalty with availability, and closeness with emotional supply. And if you have spent your life earning love by overgiving, their behavior can feel strangely familiar. That is why understanding them is not just about seeing their darkness. It is about noticing the part of you that keeps calling survival dynamics love. In everyday life, people who treat others like tools rarely announce themselves clearly. Their behavior shows up in smaller, more confusing patterns. They may be affectionate only when they need reassurance. They may disappear when your pain asks something from them. They may listen just enough to gather information, then use that information later to influence you, guilt you, or keep you emotionally attached. Around them, you start to feel that your role is not to exist, but to provide. Provide calm, provide admiration, provide access, provide forgiveness, provide endless understanding. This is why so many people end up overthinking these relationships. The signals are mixed. One day you feel chosen. The next day you feel invisible. One moment they speak to your deepest wounds with almost supernatural accuracy. The next they act cold, dismissive, or strangely entitled to your energy. That inconsistency is powerful because the human brain is wired to chase resolution. When warmth and distance keep alternating, your nervous system does not relax. It starts scanning. What did I do wrong? Why were they sweet yesterday and distant today? How can I get things back to how they were? And without realizing it, you stop asking whether the relationship is healthy and start focusing only on how to keep it. This happens in love all the time. Someone gives just enough affection to activate your hope, especially if you already carry an anxious attachment style or a fear of being left. If you grew up feeling that love had to be earned, unstable attention can feel weirdly familiar. You become the one who explains their behavior, excuses their coldness, and works harder each time they pull away. The relationship turns into a slot machine. Sometimes you receive tenderness, sometimes you receive silence. But because the reward is unpredictable, you become even more attached. What feels like deep love is sometimes a trauma bond built on emotional deprivation. It happens in families too. A parent may only show warmth when you are achieving, obeying, or emotionally taking care of them. So you learn that your worth is not in who you are, but in how useful you can be. Later, as an adult, you may attract friendships where you become the therapist, the fixer, the reliable one who listens for hours but feels guilty having needs. You may call it loyalty. You may call it being kind. But underneath, there is often an old wound whispering, like, if I stop being useful, I will stop being loved. And that is exactly why these dynamics repeat. People who use others repeat the pattern because it protects them from genuine vulnerability. People who get used repeat the pattern because it protects them from an even older fear: rejection, abandonment, conflict, or the unbearable feeling of not being enough. One person avoids intimacy by controlling. The other avoids abandonment by overgiving. And together, they create a relationship that looks intense from the outside but feels lonely on the inside. One of the clearest signs is this: you feel emotionally exhausted, yet still responsible for making the connection work. You keep translating their behavior into softer language. They are not selfish, just hurt. They are not manipulative, just afraid. They are not absent, just overwhelmed. Sometimes those things are partly true, but pain does not erase impact. A wound can explain behavior without excusing it. When someone repeatedly treats you like a function instead of a full human being, the damage is subtle but deep. You begin to abandon your own reality. You question your instincts. You become loyal to potential instead of honest about patterns. And the longer that continues, the more you confuse being needed with being valued. Healing begins with a hard realization. Not everyone who reaches for you is reaching for you. Some are reaching for relief, some are reaching for control, some are reaching for the version of you that makes their inner emptiness quieter. And if you have a soft heart, this is one of the most painful lessons to learn, because you want to believe that if you love well enough, explain gently enough, stay patient enough, people will eventually meet you with the same sincerity. But people do not become capable of healthy love just because you offer it beautifully. The turning point comes when you stop asking, how do I get them to see my worth? And start asking, why have I been trying so hard to be understandable, to stundable, to someone committed to misunderstanding me? That question changes everything. It shifts your attention away from their approval and back toward your own inner life. Because the deepest wound in these dynamics is not only that someone used you, it is that somewhere along the way, you learn to negotiate your humanity in exchange for connection. Real healing is not becoming colder. It is becoming clearer. It is learning that compassion and boundaries are not opposites. In fact, boundaries are often the most compassionate thing you can bring into a relationship because they stop false intimacy from pretending to be love. They reveal truth. A healthy person may not like your boundaries, but they can respect them. A person who only valued your usefulness will often react as if your boundary is betrayal. That reaction tells you something important. Some people do not miss you when you leave. They miss the access they had to you. If you recognize yourself as the one who keeps being used, do not shame yourself. There is usually a tender reason. Maybe you were taught to read moods before you could read your own needs. Maybe love felt conditional, so you became excellent at earning it. Maybe you learned that being easy, helpful, forgiving, and emotionally available kept you safe. Those patterns were not weakness, they were adaptation. But survival skills can quietly become self-sabotage when they follow you into adult relationships. And if you recognize yourself in the other side, in the tendency to manage, extract, charm, or treat people as emotional resources, that recognition does not have to become a life sentence. But it does require honesty. You cannot heal what you keep romanticizing. You cannot build intimacy while secretly treating vulnerability as a transaction. Growth begins when you allow yourself to feel the grief underneath the control, the fear of not being enough, the terror of being abandoned, the shame of needing love and not knowing how to ask for it cleanly. This is what maturity looks like. It is not saying people always disappoint. It is saying, I want relationships where nobody has to shrink, perform, or be consumed in order to belong. It is choosing people who can sit with truth instead of twisting it. It is learning to notice when your body feels drained, anxious, hypervigilant, or chronically responsible around someone. Your nervous system often recognizes exploitation before your mind is ready to name it. In the end, the darkest part of being treated like a tool is not that someone failed to love you well. It is that you may begin to forget you were never meant to be useful first and human second. So let this be the truth that stays with you. Love that requires you to disappear is not love. Connection that feeds on your confusion is not closeness. And the moment you stop offering yourself as a solution to other people's emptiness, you make room for something rarer, quieter, and real. Something that does not use your heart. Something that finally knows how to hold it.